matter whether you're a dyed-in-wool Jaguar enthusiast who loves the product for the brand and the racing heritage, or maybe you're just that person who loves a piece of automotive art. Well, in both those instances, the Brooklands Coventry, which we have purpose-built for every single client, is the car that will actually stir your heart. It's one of those cars that takes us back to a yesteryear when men drove real cars. Racing was real racing. The sounds of engine was what drew crowds to the racetrack. And there was something special about vehicles back in those days. The Jaguar C-Type, from which this is a tribute, was a vehicle that was sort of built and raced from between 1951 and 1953, was originally known as the XK120C, and it was very successfully raced at Le Mans, and won Le Mans 2 years in a row. Quite interestingly enough, it was the first car to actually campaign disc brakes on all four wheels, and it was one of the reasons why it was so successful on the racetrack, because obviously it facilitated the changing of brakes. It was a lot easier, a lot simpler, a lot quicker, and of course the braking capability of disc brakes compared to the drums of those days was just way superior. So really this story is a couple of guys met up after a motorcycle ride and decided they wanted to build something that had a little bit of soul and character to it. And so they sat down at a coffee table, as all these stories generally happen. And no, it wasn't on a napkin, but they actually sat down and went onto Google and looked at a couple of cars and saw this car and realized this is what they wanted. And obviously not having the skills themselves, they then employed the likes of somebody who's been doing this for many, many years. And he then researched the vehicle and the blueprint was put together. The idea was to put together a car that drove like a modern car, had the stopping and braking capabilities of a modern car, but when you were walking around the outside of the car and you were actually driving it, it had to give you the spirit of something that was developed back then. It had to sound like that. The leather had to have the correct textures, the brushed aluminiums. It had to be the real deal, but in a modern context. And this is what we've got here. The Jaguar C-Types back in those days were the power plants with 3.4 litre twin cam motors, wide angle heads for Le Mans, competition heads, and they were very, very quick for their day. And what we've done is we now take preferably vehicles that are beyond their restoration capability, vehicles that are a little bit worn, take those vehicles and we use them as donor vehicles to actually build this beautiful piece of automotive art over here. So I'm going to take you through to the engine bay of the car. As you can see, we have the typical exposed exhaust pipe, which gives a really, really crisp, lovely note to the car and makes the driving experience quite special. So in this particular car, which is our demonstration model, we're actually running a 420 motor from a Jaguar 420. Although these vehicles were originally raced with 3 side draft Webers, we found that from a practicality perspective, the twin side draft SUs were more than sufficient to take you up to speeds of in excess of 250 kilometers an hour. It has a competition exhaust system on it, a cooling system which we now upgraded to actually cope with the warmer African temperatures. The rear suspension is derived from one of the Jaguars, and in fact is a modified and an adapted double wishbone rear suspension, which is fully independent, which allows for a bit more comfortable ride, but certainly way more agile than the original solid back axle or live back axle that these cars were originally raced with. The chassis on these cars is really a work of art. So the problem with many tribute vehicles of today is you'll find that their chassis are maybe not up to standard and they suffer from a condition called scuttle shake when you're driving, which is quite annoying. I can tell you the beauty about this car is there is no scuttle shake. There are no rattles. The vehicle is firm, The chassis is beautifully stiff. It's a very safe chassis, which allows the suspension to actually do the work that it's supposed to do. If we go into the inside of the car, well, this is the beauty of the car, is when you get in, you get that essence of climbing into a real race car of that era, with the Whelan's harnesses, the wooden steering, all the controls in front of you, the Smith's gauges in front there, and you fire it up and the crisp exhaust note comes up. It gets the butterflies going, and that little boy inside you just wakes up. Or maybe the little girl inside you wakes up. But it stirs the emotion. It's a wonderful car to actually drive. I'm in fact going to start it for you. It's a cold start, so don't expect it to start first time, but I'm going to start it for you, and let's see if this does to you what it does to me. I almost feel like one of those fighter pilots of the yesteryear getting into this car. All the gauges in front of you and the switch gears, and the view in front of the little mini screens in front of you. Really a cool place to be. So let's see. Ignition on, out of gear. It's such a beautiful sound. The choke is currently running. The moment the choke switches off, the hissing goes away, and you have this beautiful warm motor that's just ready to go. And that little exhaust note, a little bit of mischief stuck in right over there. I'd actually like to take you for a quick drive up the road, and you can experience what I experience when I get into this car every single time.